I still wake up in cold sweat some nights. The sound of screeching metal and the smell of gasoline burning into my memory like a brand. They say time heals all wounds, but some scars run deeper than skin. My name's Ray Donovan, and I've been hauling freight across America for nearly 20 years. What happened that night on Route 66 wasn't just an accident. It was the closest I've ever come to having blood on my hands. Blood that would have been impossible to wash away. It started like any other Tuesday. I was at the terminal in Tulsa, Oklahoma, finishing my pre-trip inspection on my Kenworth W900, a beautiful machine I'd nicknamed Thunder for the way her engine roared to life. The dispatcher waved me into his office, which was unusual this late in the day. "Ray, got an emergency load, needs moving to Amarillo tonight," he said, sliding the paperwork across his desk. "Previous driver called in sick, clients paying triple rate for immediate delivery." I glanced at the manifest and felt my stomach tighten. Liquid propane, 8,500 gallons of it. Highly flammable, explosive under pressure. One wrong move and you've got yourself a rolling bomb. "Nobody else available?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. "You're the best hazmat driver we've got, Ray. This one needs your touch." He tapped the manifest. "Triple rate, like I said. Could set you up nice for that fishing boat you've been eyeing." I should have said no. My daughter's recital was that weekend, and I'd already missed too many important moments in her life. But 20 years on the road teaches you that promises to family often take a back seat to the demands of the job. Besides, that boat would mean summers together on the lake, making up for lost time. "I'll take it," I said, signing the paperwork. "When's the pickup?" "Now, they're loading it as we speak." 3 hours later, I was rolling west on Route 66 with 8,500 gallons of liquid disaster in my tanker. The manifest said, propane for commercial use, but what I was hauling was enough potential energy to level a small town if something went catastrophically wrong. The first few hours were smooth sailing. Night driving has always been my preference. Less traffic, cooler temperatures, and a certain peace you can't find during daylight hours. The radio kept me company. Some old Creedence Clearwater Revival and the occasional chatter on the CB. Weather report mentioned scattered showers moving in from the west. Nothing serious. Just past midnight, I crossed into the Texas Panhandle. The rain started. Light at first, then steadier. I eased off the accelerator, giving Thunder more room to breathe on the increasingly slick pavement. Route 66 through this stretch has some nasty curves, and with 8,500 gallons of propane pushing behind you, respect for physics isn't optional. It's survival. Breaker 19. This is eastbound Charlie near Shamrock. We got ourselves a situation. Up ahead. Looks like some kind of spill on the highway. Dot's not out yet, over. I grabbed my mic. This is westbound Ray, copy that. How bad we talking? Over. Like black ice in July, driver. Some tanker must have leaked. Road shining like a new dime for about a quarter mile. I nearly lost it myself. Over. Appreciate the heads up. I'm about 15 miles east of Shamrock. We'll keep an eye out. Over. I slowed down even more, dropping to 50, then 45. The rain was coming down harder now, drumming on the roof of the cab. Lightning flashed in the distance, briefly illuminating the vast emptiness of the Texas plains. My wipers struggled to keep up, and I leaned forward, straining to see through the streaked windshield. That's when I saw the first warning sign for the curve ahead, a sharp right-hander that I'd navigated 100 times before. I tapped the brakes gently, feeling Thunder's weight shift. Everything normal. I downshifted, engine braking to slow us further. Then I saw it. Even through the rain, there was no mistaking that wet sheen on the pavement, different from the rain-slick surface. It stretched across both lanes like a dark mirror, reflecting my headlights. Oil, a lot of it. I hit the brakes, harder, but it was already too late. The moment my drive wheels hit that slick, I felt the trailer begin to slide. In that split second, time slowed down. 20 years of muscle memory kicked in. Counter steer, ease off the brakes, try to ride it out. But physics doesn't care about experience. 80,000 pounds of truck and propane decided it wanted to keep going straight while the road curved right. I felt Thunder's cab jerk as the trailer began to jackknife. No, no, no! I fought the wheel, but it was like trying to redirect a river with your bare hands. The world outside my windshield became a blurry carousel of headlights. Rain and darkness. I remember the sickening sensation of tilting, the horrible groan of metal under stress, and then the impact. Thunder went over on her side, sliding across the highway in a shower of sparks. The noise was deafening, screeching metal, breaking. Glass, the deep bass rumble of the tanker dragging across asphalt. When we finally stopped moving, I was hanging in my seatbelt, the cab on its side. Blood trickled into my eye from a cut on my forehead. My left leg was pinned under the crushed dashboard. But none of that mattered. All I could think about was what I was hauling. Propane, flammable, explosive. And I just dragged a tanker, full of it, across a highway, throwing sparks like the 4th of July. I fumbled for my seatbelt release with trembling fingers, nearly falling onto the passenger window when it gave way. Every movement sent daggers of pain through my leg, but adrenaline is a hell of a painkiller. I had to get out, had to check the tanker. The driver's door was now above me. I braced myself against the passenger door and pushed upward, grunting, with effort until it finally gave way. Rain poured in, soaking me instantly. I pulled myself out, using my arms to compensate for my injured leg, slipping on the wet metal of the cab's side. What I saw nearly stopped my heart. The tanker had broken free from the fifth wheel and rolled completely over. It lay on its side about 30 feet away, one end crumpled against the guardrail. And there, at the damaged valve assembly, a steady hiss and a visible cloud forming in the rain. It was leaking. In that moment, I wasn't thinking about myself anymore. All I could see were the headlights approaching from both directions. People who had no idea they were driving toward a potential bomb. Families, maybe. Kids sleeping in the back seat while mom or dad drove through the night. I scrambled down. From the cab, my injured leg buckling when it hit the ground. I went down hard, a scream tearing from my throat as white-hot pain shot up from my knee to my hip. But I got up. Had to. First things first, warning others. I limped toward the U, approaching eastbound traffic, waving my arms frantically. The first vehicle, an SUV, slowed and stopped about 100 yards away. The driver rolled down his window. "Stay back," I shouted over the rain. "Hazardous material spill. Get as far away as you can and call 911. He nodded, eyes wide, and began to turn around. I did the same for the westbound traffic, flagging down a minivan and another semi. Within minutes, we had both directions stopped at a safe distance, but the tanker was still leaking. The propane was vaporizing as it escaped, forming a low-hanging cloud that the rain was thankfully helping to disperse. But if that cloud found an ignition source, a hot engine, a cigarette, even a static spark, we'd have a fireball that would incinerate everything within a quarter-mile radius. I knew what I had to do. During hazmat training, they drilled emergency procedures into us. I remembered the instructor's words. In a leak situation, your primary goal is containment. If safe to do so, attempt to stop or slow the leak. Safe? Nothing about this was safe, but the alternative was unthinkable. I limped back to my cab, climbing up to retrieve the emergency kit. Every tanker carrying hazardous materials has one. Specialized tools and materials for dealing with minor leaks. This was far from minor, but it was all I had. The rain was coming down in sheets now, lightning cracking overhead. Perfect. Just what you want when dealing with flammable gases. I made my way to the tanker, staying upwind of the vapor cloud. The damaged valve assembly was on the upper side of the overturned tanker, about 7 feet off the ground. I'd need to climb up. With one good leg and a body that felt like it had been through a meat grinder, that was going to be a challenge. I found a spot where the tanker's ladder was accessible and began to pull myself up, using mostly upper body strength, each movement sending fresh waves of pain through my injured leg. When I reached the top, I could see the problem clearly. The main valve was intact, but one of the peripheral fittings had cracked, Propane was escaping through a gap about the width of my thumb. Not catastrophic yet, but getting worse as the vibration from the nearby interstate caused the crack to widen. I opened the emergency kit with shaking hands. Inside was a variety of patching compounds, wrenches, and a roll of specialized sealing tape designed for chemical leaks. I grabbed the tape and a tub of putty-like substance. Working with hands, numbed by rain and fear, I scooped out a handful of the putty and pressed it into the crack, trying to pack it in as tightly as possible. The hissing diminished slightly, but didn't stop. Next came the tape, wrapped around the fitting as tightly as I could manage. 3 layers, 4, 5, until the hissing finally stopped. It wasn't a permanent fix, not by a long shot, but might hold until the hazmat team arrived. I carefully made my way back down, leg throbbing with each movement. Only when my feet touched the ground did I allow myself to really feel the pain and exhaustion. I staggered back to the line of stopped vehicles where a state trooper had now arrived. His flashers painted the rainy night in alternating blue and red. "Sir, are you the driver?" he asked, eyeing my bloodied face and the way I limped toward him. I nodded. "Tankers carrying liquid propane, Class 2 hazardous material. There was a leak, but I've temporarily patched it. We need a hazmat team here, say P, and we need to maintain at least a half-mile evacuation zone." To his credit, the trooper didn't waste time with questions. He got on his radio immediately, calling in the situation. Within minutes, more patrol cars arrived, expanding the perimeter and redirecting traffic. An ambulance showed up shortly after. The EMTs wanted to take me to the hospital immediately, but I refused to leave until the hazmat team arrived. I needed to brief them on what I'd done, what they were dealing with. "Sir, your leg needs immediate attention," one of the EMTs insisted, gesturing to my now swollen knee. "My leg can wait," I said through gritted teeth. "That tanker can't." It was nearly an hour before the hazmat team arrived. An hour of standing in the rain, watching my temporary patch and praying it would hold. When they finally showed up in their silver protective suits and breathing apparatus, I've never been so relieved to see anyone in my life. I briefed the team leader, explaining exactly what had happened and what I'd done to contain the leak. He listened carefully, asked a few questions, then put a hand on my shoulder. "You did good, driver. Real good. That patch job probably saved lives tonight. Now let these medics take care of you." This time I didn't argue. As they loaded me into the ambulance, I caught one last glimpse of Thunder, lying broken on her side. 20 years on the road, and it had come to this. A slick of oil, a curve taken thousands of times before, and 8,500 gallons of disaster that almost was. At the hospital, they diagnosed a fractured tibia, 3 cracked ribs, and a concussion. Could have been worse. Much worse. While I was lying there, the hazmat team leader came to see me. He'd supervised the transfer of the propane to another tanker and the safe removal of my damaged rig. "Thought you'd want to know," he said, pulling up a chair beside my bed. "Your patch held perfectly, not a drop more leaked out." I nodded, relief washing over me. "Good to hear. What's not good to hear is what could have happened." He leaned forward, his expression grave. "We did some calculations based on the amount of propane in that tanker and the populated area nearby. If that leak had found an ignition source..." He paused, shaking his head. "We're talking about a blast radius of at least a quarter mile. There was a truck stop less than half a mile down the road with at least 30 rigs and a restaurant full of people." The weight of his words settled on my chest, heavier than the truck that had pinned me. I'd known it was bad, but hearing it quantified made it real in a way I hadn't fully processed. "There's something else," he continued. "The oil on the road. It wasn't an accident. State Patrol found evidence that it was deliberately poured across the highway. They're treating it as attempted sabotage." "Sabotage?" I echoed, disbelief coloring my voice. "Who would do something like that?" "They don't know yet. Could be eco-terrorists targeting hazmat shipments. Could be someone with a grudge against the trucking industry. Either way, you weren't the intended target. You were just unlucky enough to be the first hazmat carrier to hit that spot." Unlucky. The word hung in the air between us. Was it unlucky to be the one who crashed? Or lucky that it was me? Someone with the training and experience to prevent a catastrophe, rather than a rookie who might have panicked and run. Later that night, my boss showed up. I expected to be fired on the spot. Wrecked rig, insurance nightmare, potential environmental disaster. Instead, he pulled up a chair next to my bed. The company's insurance investigator reviewed the accident site, he said. You're completely in the clear. No driver error involved. I nodded, not sure what to say. What you did out there, he continued, going back to that leaking tanker. Most people would have run the other way. It was my load, I said simply. My responsibility. He studied me for a long moment. We need more drivers like you, Ray. When you're healed up, there's a brand new Kenworth waiting for you. And a raise. I should have felt relief, gratitude even. Instead, all I could think about was how close we'd come to disaster. How many lives had hung in the balance because of a deliberate act of malice and the cruel randomness of timing. 3 days later, I was released from the hospital with my leg in a cast and strict orders to take it easy. My ex-wife brought our daughter, Lily, to pick me up. On the drive home, Lily was unusually quiet in the back seat. "What's on your mind, sweetheart?" I asked, twisting around to see her. She looked up from her phone, her eyes, so much like her mother's, serious beyond her 12 years. "Dad, I saw the news reports about what could have happened if that gas had exploded." I nodded slowly. "It didn't, though. But it could have." Her voice was small. "And you went back to fix it, with your leg all broken and everything. It was my job." "No, Dad." She shook her head, surprisingly adamant. "Your job was to drive the truck. What you did?" She paused, searching for words. "Mom says you're a hero." I glanced at my ex-wife, surprised. We hadn't exactly parted on the best of terms. My long absences on the road a major factor in our divorce. She caught my look in the rearview mirror and shrugged. "Well, you are." This time, we drove in silence for a while, the weight of what could have happened settling between us. Finally, Lily spoke again. "So, are you done? With driving, I mean?" I looked out at the highway stretching before us, thinking about that night. The fear, yes, but also the certainty, the knowing exactly what needed to be done and doing it despite everything. "No," I said finally. "But I'm thinking maybe I need to be home more, find routes that get me back to you more often." Lily's face lit up. "Really? You mean it?" "I mean it." I reached back and squeezed her hand. Some things are more important than the job. 6 weeks later, my cast came off. The physical therapy was brutal, but I was determined to get back on the road. Not just for myself, but to prove something. That what happened that night hadn't broken me. That I could face the highway again on my own terms. During my recovery, the investigation into the oil spill had progressed. They'd arrested a former driver who'd been fired from a competing company for safety violations. His plan had been simple and horrifying. Cause accidents involving hazmat carriers to create environmental disasters that would damage the industry's reputation. He'd targeted 3 different spots along major trucking routes. Mine was the only one that resulted in an accident, thanks to the rain that night. The knowledge that someone had deliberately created that situation, had willingly risked countless lives for a twisted vendetta, kept me awake many nights. How do you make sense of that kind of malice? How do you get back behind the wheel knowing there are people out there who see you as nothing more than a means to an end? The answer came to me gradually during those long weeks of recovery. Every day, I'd sit on my front porch watching the trucks roll by on the distant highway, each one carrying something someone needed: food, medicine, building materials, fuel, the lifeblood of the country, flowing along its arteries of asphalt and, concrete. What I'd done that night, patching that leak, stopping that disaster, wasn't exceptional. It was what any of us would do when faced with the choice between running away or standing our ground. It was the job, not just driving from point A to point B, but accepting the responsibility that comes with hauling 40 tons of freight across a continent. The day I returned to work, My boss walked me out to the yard where a brand new Kenworth W900L stood gleaming in the morning sun, midnight blue with silver trim, my favorite colors. "She's all yours," he said, handing me the keys. "What are you going to name her?" I ran my hand along the smooth curve of the hood, feeling the cool metal beneath my fingers. "Phoenix," I said finally, because we both rose from the ashes. My first load back was nothing special, just household goods heading to Albuquerque. No hazardous materials, nothing that could explode or burn or poison a water table. My boss was easing me back in, and I appreciated it. As I approached the Texas Panhandle, I felt my hands tighten on the wheel. I was nearing the spot where it had happened. Part of me wanted to take a detour, avoid that stretch of Route 66 altogether. But that would be giving into fear, and if there's one thing truckers can't afford, it's fear of the road. The curve came into view, looking so ordinary in the daylight. They'd repaved that section, the asphalt still darker than the surrounding road. I slowed down, not out of fear, but respect. Respect for what had happened here, for what could have happened. As I navigated the curve, I noticed something on the side of the road that hadn't been there before. A small white cross, the kind you see marking the sites of fatal accidents. But no one had died here. I pulled over at the next turnout and walked, back curious. It wasn't a cross at all, but a small metal marker embedded in the ground. On it was a simple inscription. "On this spot, disaster was averted. Remember that one person can make a difference." I stood there for a long time, the wind of passing trucks ruffling my hair. Who had placed this marker? The hazmat team? The state patrol? It didn't matter. What mattered was the truth of those words. One person can make a difference. Sometimes that difference is as simple as doing your job, taking responsibility, refusing to run when everything in you screams to get away. I returned to Phoenix and continued my journey west. As the miles rolled beneath my wheels, I felt something I hadn't expected. Peace. Not because I'd done anything extraordinary that night, but because I'd done what was necessary. And in the end, isn't that what defines us? Not the disasters we face, but how we face them. 2 years have passed since that night on Route 66. I'm still driving, though I've switched to regional routes that get me home to Lily most weekends. We're rebuilding our relationship one fishing trip, one movie night, one homework session at a time. Sometimes, when I'm driving that stretch of Route 66 through the Texas Panhandle, I slow down at that curve. Not just because of what happened, but as a reminder that what we carry with us on this journey, whether it's 8,500 gallons of propane or the responsibility for other lives, matters more than we can ever know. And sometimes in the darkest hours of the night, with nothing but the rumble of tires and the distant glow of the next town on the horizon, I think about those people at the truck stop who never knew how close they came to disaster. People who went home to their families, who woke up the next morning to live another day, who are out there right now living lives that might have ended on a rain-slick highway in the Texas Panhandle. That's the thing about near misses. The world doesn't stop to acknowledge them. There's no monument to what didn't happen, no celebration for the disaster averted, just the quiet knowledge that for one night, on one stretch of America's most famous highway, the difference between tragedy and just another rainy evening came down to a roll of specialized tape, a tub of chemical putty, and the stubborn refusal of one battered truck driver to let the worst happen on his watch. I've come to terms with what happened that night. The nightmares have mostly stopped, but I still carry the memory with me, tucked away like the emergency kit in my new rig. A reminder that the most important cargo we carry isn't in our trailers. It's the responsibility we accept every time we turn the key and pull onto the highway. Because out there on the open road, when disaster strikes, sometimes you're all that stands between a normal day and a tragedy that makes the evening news. And in those moments, what you do or don't do can echo far beyond the reach of your headlights. So the next time you pass a big rig on the highway, give them a little extra room. That driver isn't just hauling freight, they're carrying the weight of responsibility that comes with it. And trust me, that's the heaviest load of all.